it. I just don't know if I want to go.
No, it's all right.
Just use your head. That's a block.
Shut up. I hope they caught that on camera. Good morning. We'll start. We'll bring this meeting to order. This is the Standing Committee on Public Accounts. Today is Tuesday, June 2nd, 2026. And we always start off this meeting by reading the Statement of Purpose and Values. The Standing Committee on Public Accounts is dedicated to improving public administration in partnership with the Auditor General. The committee examines the administration of government policies, not the merit of it. The committee strives to achieve consensus in its decisions wherever possible. Members take a nonpartisan approach to the work of this committee, and I'd like to welcome our guests today. I'm the Chair, Gordon McNeely, of the committee. We're here with Vice Chair Tyler DeRoche. And members here, Matt McFarland is here, Carolyn Simpson, Susie Dillon, Brenda, I forgot your last name for a second, Current, Panicked, Hilton McLennan, and Peter Bevan Baker, and our clerk is Ryan today. Can I get, at this time, can I get a motion to adopt the agenda? Carolyn Simpson, and I'd like to welcome our guests here today, and we'll pass it over to you. We'll try to save questions to the end as best we can. If there are clarification question or two, we might do that because we're going over a few different sections, but hold your questions and you can ask clarification questions as we get going, hopefully, and we'll try to figure out an order at the end that best promotes questions from everybody. So I'll pass it over to our guests to introduce themselves for Hansard, and then you're welcome to continue on with your presentation. So the floor is yours.
Perfect. Good morning. Thank you very much for having us. My name is Lorraine Klashinsky, and I am the interim CEO here at Health PEI.
And I'm Corinne Rosewell, and I'm the Chief Operating Officer for Health PEI.
Good morning, Christine Sewell, the Chief Financial Officer.
All right, so we have obviously prepared a couple questions to answer some of the questions that have come up recently, and thank you again, just to ease sort of the guidance of information and making sure that we can cover the items we want to. We do ask that, if possible, hold the questions to the end, but ultimately we will do what we can to answer any questions and provide additional information. So we definitely appreciate the opportunity to discuss the findings of the Auditor General's 2026 report, specifically Chapter 11, which relates to our annual financial audit. Our purpose today is to outline the issues identified and to speak to the actions we are taking to address them. We welcome the discussion as an important part of our accountability to all islanders. Within Chapter 11, the Auditor General identified a total of 7 issues and recommendations. Of these, 3 are new and 4 recurring. 4 of these relate to internal control weaknesses, while 3 relate to compliance matters. The objective of the audit is to obtain reasonable assurance that the financial statements of our organization are free from material misstatement. With respect to Health PEI, the Auditor General issued a clean or unqualified audit opinion. None of the findings relate to accuracy, completeness, or compliance within our accounting standards in our financial statements. However, issues and opportunities which may be of interest to management were noted, and we are committed to addressing where possible. Finally, some of the matters are outside of the scope of control of Health PEI and may be more suitably addressed by government or other parties. So for the items identified in Chapter 11, they are summarized in this above chart and really identify the sections in which they are addressed, the issue, the category, and whether they are new or recurring. Over the next slides, we'll talk about our summary of what was issued and any of our action items to date.
This finding relates to how travel nurse costs were reflected in our budget. Historically, agency staffing costs were not shown as a separate budget line, as they were expected to be offset by savings from vacant positions. However, in recent years, the volume and cost of agency staffing has increased, and as a result, those vacancy savings were no longer sufficient to cover the high cost of travel nurses. In response, we strengthened our budgeting approach, and the 2026-27 budget now includes $16.5 million for agency staffing across acute care, community hospitals, and long-term care. And while we continue to rely on agency staff to maintain critical services, we are focused on reducing that reliance through targeted recruitment and retention, collective agreements that support hiring in hard-to-fill roles, and stronger position management controls. And overall, this change will improve planning, oversight, and alignment with approval processes. This finding highlights a significant accumulation of unused vacation time across the organization. We recognize that operational pressures and staffing shortages have limited employees' ability to take time off in some cases, but this does create a risk related to employee well-being, retention, and a financial liability. We agree with the recommendation, and we are taking action. Employees are actively encouraged to take vacation while balancing operational requirements. And in addition, we're developing a vacation policy framework to better monitor usage, manage accumulated balances, and ensure compliance with collective agreements. And our goal will be to reduce the liability over time while supporting a healthy and sustainable workforce.
So this finding in the AG report focused on lack of formal service agreements with other provincial health authorities. And we do agree with that. So the Health PEI and the residents of Prince Edward Island are dependent on out-of-province services for certain subspecialty services especially. And many of you may have traveled off-island to receive those services. We do not have formal agreements. Over the years, they have been, those services have been delivered on handshake agreements, and we have been working over the last couple of years to actually create formal agreements. We're in the final legal review, and it's important to note that the agreements with Prince Edward Island, or between Prince Edward Island, New Brunswick, and Nova Scotia will be signed by all levels of government and 5 health authorities, including Health PEI. So 2 health authorities in Nova Scotia, 2 health authorities in PEI, New Brunswick rather, plus Health PEI. And so we're actively engaged in conversations. In fact, we have an oversight committee meeting on Friday, and we're anticipating that those will be signed off as soon as possible.
This is a recurring finding related to delays in completing physician billing audits. Audit work was postponed due to capacity gaps, including a vacant senior claims auditor position, and as a result, an audit plan was not executed. To address this, we have taken immediate action. Health PEI has engaged a partner to reestablish the physician audit program, and the work is now underway, which includes a structured audit approach. And at the same time, we've been working to build internal capacity by recruiting for a dedicated audit role, and then the combined approach will ensure stronger oversight, improved accountability, and better protection of public funds. This finding relates to a contract that exceeded its approved value without prior Treasury Board approval. While total spending across the contracts remained within overall approved limits, one specific contract exceeded its authorized threshold. We acknowledge that this did not align with Treasury Board policy, and since then, corrective action has been taken. Treasury Board approval has now been obtained for the increased contract value, and we are working to strengthen our internal controls to prevent this from occurring, including enhanced and centralized monitoring of contracts and improved approval processes. And these improvements will ensure full compliance with Treasury Board requirements going forward.
11.47 is regarding the business and strategic plans not having been submitted by approval on a timely basis. I think the important part and the ask was that we submit them in advance of fiscal year start. And there's a few things that we have to take into consideration in achieving that recommendation. In October of 2025, Health PEI finalized and published its 2025 to 2028 strategic plan, along with the 25-26 business plan. Every annual business plan definitely supports the overall sort of umbrella strategic plan and the multi-year strategy. And definitely we want to make sure that it highlights the things we're taking in that year to support that and the work that we're going to take place in that exact year. Part of that report does include our budget and allocation of funds that align with the annual plan in addition to the overall strategic plan. Given timing of approvals for budgets and then implementing the report, we're not always able to make it by the April 1st recommendation. I think the key thing is, as Health PEI, we are committed to improving timelines where possible within our scope of control. And I can assure you that we are actively working on this year's annual business plan, and we'll publish as soon as we can finalize, with our budget just having been completed very recently.
So this finding relates to Health PEI not having asbestos management plans for all Health PEI buildings with asbestos-containing materials. And a review has been completed of Health PEI-owned buildings to identify which of those buildings may contain asbestos, and that surveys have been completed by qualified environmental consultants, and plans have been created for any building that are known or suspected to have asbestos-containing materials. We've developed plans for all Health PEI buildings that require them. Annual reviews and updates to the asbestos management plans are ongoing, and we have a policy that is currently in stakeholder review.
So in closing, Health PEI truly values the work of the Auditor General and its commitment, and we are committed to addressing the audit recommendations to the extent the relevant authorities are within the control of Health PEI. Some of these solutions and interventions will take some time to implement, but we have started on many and continue to work towards finalizing and endeavoring to meet all recommendations. And with that, we'll open the floor.
Thank you very much for an efficient presentation, and that'll leave us quite a good time for questions. So at this time, I don't have anybody on my list unless you want me to ask them some questions myself, but I see Brendan and then Matt to start up our list. Brendan, go ahead.
Thank you, and thank you for coming. I know it's a lot of work to prepare for some of these standing committees, and it's good work to be done here at these committees. But I know it takes a lot of your resources to prepare. So I appreciate you coming with such a efficient but yet informative presentation. I only have two questions, and it just piqued my interest. When we were talking about some of the agency staff, and you said that there is strategic or critical recruitment being done to lessen the reliance on some of those agency staffs, what are the departments that are identified for recruitment for some of these critical positions? So I'm thinking, like, is it the OR, is it the ER, is it Unit 3 at QEH, is it?
Yeah, so we have agency staff across our facilities, but the hot spots, if you will, are Prince County Hospital, Western Hospital. We do have some at the QEH in the emergency department, critical care unit. So a lot of our critical places are those that require more than an entry level to practice competencies. And so that's why we have a higher number in those areas. And so nursing is one, also RCWs, LPNs, like we're in recruitment for all of our healthcare providers.
When it comes to diagnostic services, do we use agency staff?
We do have some, and it's to maintain those critical services and to increase or to decrease our wait times. And those are, there's a handful of diagnostic imaging staff. What we know is that those are relatively small numbers of staff, and one leave will create a critical gap. And so, yeah, there's a handful.
Brendan?
Just one more. And I'll jump to the strategic plan. And it was just one thing that kind of piqued my interest, and whether it's operational or just in the essence of time. For your strategic plan, it says from 2025 to 2028. Is there any reason why we just chose a 3-year window? Is it because of just the evolution of staffing, or is it like many strategic plans are 5 years, maybe even longer than that, but we just identified a 3-year strategic plan? Is there any reason just for that short time frame?
I think the strategic plan was definitely intended to be goal setting, aspirational, but also within reach. And laying that foundation and principles at the outset of a 3-year allows us to really monitor, see where we are, and then set longer term goals. The foundations are really sort of, broad across our system and ensuring that everyone's aligned with it. We've hit the mark and we're able to focus where islanders need us to focus most are really important. The principles probably will remain far beyond 3 years. I think, the tasks assigned in each of those zones to meet the strategic plan are where we have sort of our annual business plan to roll up and sort of the things we can demonstrate action in to align with our strategic plan. And I think, when we review for the future, whether we say 3 to 5 years is best, I think the important part is we want to make sure that we're setting goals for our organization that endure beyond the strategic plan, because healthcare is constant, and I think that that's really important. But also we have to make sure that the goals we set within our plan are within reach, given mandates of government, budgets, and ultimately our ability to deliver upon the things we need to do to provide health services in this province.
For now.
Thanks, Brandon.
For now.
Matt?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you all for coming in this morning. I appreciate the update and the information. Just a few questions, and maybe just starting at the beginning with the recommendation 11.15, which is the proper budgeting for anticipated cost of agency nurses. I know in the 2025-2026 budget, it was pretty glaring just how little was budgeted for that expense that I think a lot of people saw would continue to grow. And in fact, it did. In the last fiscal year, we saw quite a bit of growth in the use of agency staffing and nurses. I see the 2026-27 budget is allocated $16.5 million, which is still close to being roughly half, I believe, of what the actual spend was. So I guess my question would be, do you feel that we're meeting the Auditor General's recommendation by anticipating actual costs for this amount? Are we still actually achieving what his recommendation was? And do you think it's realistic that we will drop the current spend in one fiscal year down to what's the budgeted amount? Is that a realistic goal?
So I can speak to the operational considerations, and we'll ask Christine to perhaps add some more financial components. Operationally, in late 25-26 and early 26-27, we started in a profound level of overcapacity. And so that's a perfect example of agency staff being used to support core operations in our system that have exceeded sort of our baseline operating budget and volume. So we finished last year having staffed up, and because those staff and needs exceeded what we have in our local workforce, we had to utilize a lot of agency staff. Additionally, we ran and sort of started April 1st in that same situation because overcapacity didn't end when the fiscal year started. And so we definitely are working to run that down where possible, but we also have to make sure that we're able to respond to the system. We did set a goal for our reduction in agency staff because we do want to commit to growing our own workforce locally. We want to make sure, to Corinne's point, where we're not only recruiting to, but where we're educating our nurses that they're able to sustain and grow their careers within our system. A lot of the places where we use agency staff are highly skilled positions where they require specific training and, sort of a recurring high volume of use at that scope to maintain competency. And so sometimes we do rely on people traveling to the province that may have more exposure to that on an ongoing basis. So we may be able to secure one or two or a small number of team members to do that work locally, which is great. But if, vacation, time off, leaves, we have to sort of build that capacity up. The other thing we're trying to do is really work with our educators and our learners across the system to say, how do we further encourage staff to pursue education in those critical areas so that we can ultimately, endeavor to reduce or eliminate agency staff within the realm of possibility. And I think that's something that we're really trying to do. It's been a discussion point, I know, within our nursing partners, our educators and beyond. We're committed to supporting education and additional learning. And, we met with our new graduates, our group of new graduates recently, and we really want to know where they want to go. So although they may not be direct entry to practice positions, we want to know where they are so we can build that and peer mentor them throughout their journey and build a system that can sustain change, whether it be overcapacity or enhanced need in these critical areas. But also we have to make decisions so that we can operate a 24/7 business. Healthcare is hard, it is constant, and it evolves constantly. And so we need to make sure that we're able to put those resources where they're needed. Additionally, other areas where we're seeing is really our rural long-term care. And that's a perfect example of, you may have an N of 1 RN in a rural long-term care community. And so that's somewhere where you really want to make sure that person is set up for success to not only sustain the shift, but sustain the career. And we want to make sure those resources are there. And so we need to pipeline work and training and education and support in the career to get them there, but it doesn't mean that we will place them there. And if they are placed there out of graduation or entry to practice, we want to make sure that the supports are in place in their first, weeks, months, and years of practice so that they want to stay there as well. And if you have any specific financial components, we'll give.
Yeah, I'm happy to add from the budget perspective. So this was noted in our 24-25 financial statements, and then you're correct. In 25-26, a very limited budget for agency staffing. And as I spoke to, it was really that view that the core positions were fully budgeted and fully funded, so when those vacancies arose, then we would have the core position funding to offset. And for all of the reasons that Lorraine has talked about operationally and including overcapacity, where those are net new and not a core funded position, and that a higher cost and higher premium of agency staffing. We did acknowledge that, and so believing that the $16.5 million reflects sort of that balance between an aggressive operational plan to reduce the use of agency staffing, but still preserve them where critically necessary.
Matt?
No, thank you for that. That's a full answer. And when we look at, say, the concern of lack of formal service agreements with other provincial health authorities, and I might have a question on that after, but that's looking at a regional collaborative approach with our maritime provinces. Do you know, is that in fact happening on the agency nursing front as well, looking at the other provinces? Because it's a problem for New Brunswick, problem for Nova Scotia, problem for Newfoundland, Labrador, problem for PEI. So there was some discussion a little while ago with the minister about looking at a regional approach. Is that part of the approach of Health PEI to address that concern of the Auditor General, is working with our other provinces on a unified approach?
I know there's been conversations at the CEO table for the regional health authorities across Atlantic Canada and how we can collectively solution to sort of solve the realities of agency utilization. I think knowing that those conversations can be collaborative and we can come up to many ideas together, we also all operate in unique ecosystems, and we have to make sure that those decisions, can be scaled to an operation like Health PEI. And so I think one of those things the group was committed to looking at it, considering, and each health authority had some suggestions, ideas, or experiences that may or may not have worked. I think, we're continuing to have those conversations. To say that a specific plan through that group has been established is not true, and that we're really open to having the conversations, but I think the solution is really complicated. And so we're definitely trying to see what can work, what we can try, but the fortunate part is it's not our problem alone to solve. So nationally, at the federal and provincial territorial table, these conversations are going when we're looking at our workforce, when we're looking at our union and partners across Canada. Everyone's really trying to collectively come up with something that we can sustain and scale as required, appreciating that there are nuances in every province that have to be considered, everything from education to opportunities and staffing models to collective bargaining agreements. And I think one of the things that we have in Health PEI is we are good partners with our Atlantic counterparts, but we also have a priority that we have to sustain what we can do here. And so we want to make sure that collectively we're finding solutions that can be scaled, but ultimately, benefit PEI as well. So it's a long way of saying, I think the conversations are ongoing. The answer is not simple. And I think if it was, we would have already implemented those changes. But we're working to do what we can, where we can.
Matt, one more?
Great, thank you. I guess my last question in this set, then I'll just move to the concern on the vacation time usage, and that is pretty critical. If you look at the fast-paced, high-stress world of healthcare, we want our employees to have the breaks that they're entitled to. what I'm hearing is that, you know, one of the potential problems in getting uptake on using the vacation time would be that there has to be such an advance notice put in by employees as to when they would like to take their time off. And it seems that it was the person who had reached out to me, or people suggested that it's months, if not up to a year in advance, you have to put in when you want your time off, and that's an impediment or a discouragement to being able to use your vacation. Could you comment on that as to maybe being a factor as to why people aren't taking their vacation time, and why would that be? Is it because the operations within different units and clinics and hospitals are so tight that people can't take their time off because it would result in the shuttering of a unit?
I think it's a little more nuanced than that, and it is part of our collective agreements in terms of when you're supposed to have your vacation submitted in order for our teams to schedule to cover those shifts 24/7. So that is part of it. So there are very clear dates, and we're bound by the dates that we have to provide what the schedule looks like and where those vacancies may be, so that part-time people or casual are able to pick up, or where we have to fill a shift with somebody else. But it's really part of that collective agreement process. And if you think about the desired times for people to be off, which is typically around the holidays and around the summer break, there's very clear parameters around when you have to, what we're operationally feasible, where we try to ensure that people have a number of weeks off at a time, those kind of things. So it's seniority based as well. So I think it is complicated, and our staffing our vacation planning for the summer starts in February, in terms of making sure that especially those 24/7 can be covered. And then the other part is, where a lot of our other services are not, they're 7 days a week as well. They may not be 24/7, but they do need to be covered so that we don't have a backup in our hospitals. So our community-based programs are operating fully as well.
I think it's just important to note, as an addition, that a lot of these balances sort of, began to really accrue at large volumes during COVID. Yeah. And so we had a responsibility to, healthcare operations was core, as was protecting our team, but it was a delicate balance of sustaining a system and supporting our staff. And I think, we say it in our strategy, but we say it in how we lead every day, is we want to find the balance. We want to support the people working in our system to stay in our system and to be safe and valued in our system, whilst managing 24/7 care. And I think it's a challenging scenario. At the same time, we want to be compliant with our collective bargaining agreements. We want to make sure that everyone is clear of the process. And then we also want to make sure that we're recruiting to those places so that we have the depth required, so that when one comes off on vacation, the system can support it within itself and doesn't rely on the agency staff to cover those shifts.
I think just to add to, we absolutely want our staff to have time off. Like, it's much earned, much deserved, and it's incredibly important to have that rest and recovery time so that you can come back after that time and do it all over again. So I think it's really important, and we're actively encouraging our staff to take time where they can.
Thank you very much. So just to let everybody know, we have Carolyn, Susie, and then Brendan's back on the list, but Peter's on for the first time, and then Tyler. So I'll have to make a decision there. But right now, it's going to Carolyn.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. That was really well done and informative for us. And so, but I'm wondering about some of the recommendations that are recurring. So is it Health PEI's view that you agree or disagree with some of the recommendations from the Auditor General, and might that be a reason why they haven't been attached? Or I guess I'll reframe that. Are there any of the recommendations that you disagree with?
No, at large, I think we're in agreement with all the recommendations. I think, as we said in the presentation, the solutions to address them aren't always within our independent reach, or within sort of short cycles of solution. So we agree that we want to address all the things that were identified, just some of them are more complex and require other agencies, partners, governments, policies to also enable our ability to respond as quickly as possible within the realms of reality.
Thank you. Do you have a time?
Carolyn?
Oh, I'm sorry, Chair.
No, that's okay.
Can I just get into the groove here? Thank you, Chair. Do you have a timeline in terms of the schedule of response to, because they are complicated. So do you have a plan that your board has approved that says this is how we will tackle each of these over a 5-year plan or something like that that you could share with us?
It would be more individual pieces that we have and some of the, so the 4 recurring maybe, so we have the formal services agreements that Corinne spoke to, and I think that one's fairly close to resolving, so we'd expect to see that one soon. The internal physician billing audits was a recurring one, and to Ray's point, that's one that took us a little bit of time to identify a partner, enter into an agreement with a partner, and restart that work. But that one is now work underway and should be resolved through the next cycle and through the next review. Business plans is one where that timing, not fully within our control, so, we wouldn't be able to necessarily have a timeline on when we might be able to change that one. And then the asbestos management plans, I understand, are also under control. So those, of the 4 recurring, I think 3 we feel very confident are addressed.
Carolyn?
Thank you. If we can go to the agency staff, the travel nurses, as we've come to call folks, and that is aggressive, that approach that you've taken. But how will you manage for that? Because if it was an issue 6 months ago, how can it not be an issue today? So have travel nurses moved into full-time positions, or are you confident that the nursing component, the nursing staff, you can get enough people in to fill those positions?
So that goes back to the campus recruiting that I spoke about, and happy to say that of all of the new graduates in 2026, we've secured and matched all of those who wanted positions, and what was really refreshing is the majority wanted full-time permanent positions. So we've been able to secure those, and we have active plans for the accelerated nursing program, as well as internationally educated nurses as well. So we're doing our level best to bring every nurse in that we can. And as Lorraine mentioned earlier about the pipelining, so where we do actively bring a certain number into the emergency department, for example, at the QEH, and how we support them so that they gain those critical knowledge and skills and ensure that they're maintain competencies. So I think we will be reliant on agency staff for the foreseeable future, but we are also very much trying to streamline that, and we've invested in our professional practice team this fiscal year, which will also ensure that we have the abilities to set these nurses up for success and ensure their ongoing education, their training, and their ability to assume the role fully. And so the agency staff do create almost like a rotating area. They're not sort of consistently in those specific areas. They move from position to position. But we, to Lorraine's point, we were almost, at the QEH, for example, we were almost free from using any agency staff until this recent overcapacity situation. So it's a balance between responding to the needs of our 24/7 sites and ensuring that we're catching every single nurse that comes through our pipeline.
Last one, Carolyn?
Thank you. Thank you for that, Corinne. So, but I do wonder about the how realistic, and so I'll go to Treasury Board then. So the Treasury Board process, how confident are you in that projecting ahead to, and it's the unforeseen, and I understand that, but projecting ahead to, we thought we would reach this target, it doesn't appear that we're going to be able to, and now we're offside in terms of our financial realities. So what process do you have in place to safeguard yourselves up against being offside in terms of Treasury Board processes and meeting the demands that you need to within Health PEI as well?
Yep. from an operations perspective, so what we do, we have a team that works specifically on the agency staffing, and so we get regular reports weekly in terms of what staff are where. So we have a very good idea of where people are. And then on a quarterly basis, we do review to make sure that the targets that we've set to see where we are, and that will inform our Treasury Board reporting.
And from a financial perspective and a process perspective, we're working to implement some internal controls and centralize oversight of contracting so that we establish sort of a cross-functional review of them. We have a single point of contact that has a line of sight and access to all of the contracts and awareness and a tracking of them. So that's what we'd have there. And then I think maybe more broadly from a fiscal management and Treasury Board perspective, we are undertaking a program review to help us manage unforeseen costs by looking at the resources we have and ensuring that they're deployed as effectively as possible across the organization, which may give us some opportunity to react internally to pressures with what we have, if we have a really good line of sight to what we have, where it is, and how it's being used.
Thank you. Can you put me back on?
Thank you, yes. Susie?
Thanks. I'm going to turn this down so that Hansard can hear, because they may get a little bit cranky with me. I'm going to jump off what Carolyn was saying, but first I guess I should say thank you for coming, and I agree your presentation was clear, concise, and right to the point. The travel or the agency nurses, I do hear from nurses that are working in our system that there can be a little bit of feeling of that they get paid a whole lot more than the nurses that are working here in PEI. Is there anything being done to support the nurses here on PEI and making sure that they feel valued, whether that's through pay or whether that's through other things? Are we doing anything to make sure that they're feeling good about what they're doing?
So as an organization, we're really focusing on our employee recognition program and really trying to also provide pathways for them to identify areas of interest for additional learning. We collaborate regularly with our union partners to really make sure that we can support the workforce based on sort of their feedback. And I think not only that's a collective bargaining agreement, but it's also beyond that as well. And I think the goal is to really just make sure that we're able to support the feedback loops where possible. We will never be in a position, I think, to sort of neutralize or normalize, minimize the gap, I should say, between agency and our core staff, and that's because there are other things associated with agency worth, travel, time away from their family, short-term accommodations, and, adjusting to a new site regularly. And again, we need them to be there for certain periods of time within our system, but that doesn't mean that we value them differently or more than the team that, show up and work within Health PEI every day. We need everyone to contribute to the best of their ability where they are in their roles, and we definitely know that, our team definitely doesn't always feel heard or seen, but we're working to address that wherever possible. Our people and professional practice division has really been a focus within Health PEI over the last 9+ months, and we're continuing to do additional things to improve sort of the employee in-person experience of working at Health PEI, and we're hoping that that better supports our nurses and all of our staff. And I think that's one of the things that we're really trying to collectively solution for, and that's within our own organization, but also in collaboration with our union partners. And we had a great conversation last week with one of our union partners, and again, they provided some feedback and suggestions, and I think, they're definitely ones that we can consider and work to implement. And it was even about like mentoring new hires and an approach to do that. So I think, the conversation is open, and we want to continue to hear ideas and suggestions and feedback, and we want to be able to implement those suggestions where possible. Appreciating that we may not be always able to say yes to everything, and it's not because we maybe don't want to, but we have to really think about scalability and sustainability within our system.
Susie?
Well, that leads into my next question, because I wondered if there was the ability, and maybe this is happening, but for the nurses that are in the system to be able to pick up overtime shifts, and maybe some of those shifts could be during peak times and maybe lesser times, and those that are working part-time might like to pick up a 4-hour or 6-hour shift. Is there the ability to be able to offer those types of opportunities to those that are working in our system already? And realizing if you're full-time and you pick up another shift, there's going to be overtime occurred in that, but perhaps maybe that overtime is even maybe less than having a travel nurse. Is there those opportunities for our nurses in the system?
So our collective bargaining agreements do allow for different sort of approaches and models to additional shifts beyond your core schedule. They vary from obviously when they're picked up to when they're scheduled, how many based commitment. And that is, a delicate conversation with our union partners about what makes the most sense collectively. And I think the piece too is we have to be really mindful. And to Corinne's point, we were so happy to hear this year that our grads were really looking for permanent full-time work. Historically, over the last couple of years, we actually saw a bit of a shift to more interest in part-time and casual. And there is a flexibility with part-time and casual work that isn't there with full-time. And then our hope is that if you have enough people sort of working, higher percentages of FTEs and full-time, then you'll have more stability to cover those shifts. And so we want to make sure that the way we design our system and the way we sort of partner with our unions and collective agreements in designing those is that we still, prioritize the behavior the system needs, and that we don't, in an attempt to solve one problem, create another. So we have to be really mindful that we don't create a pathway where last minute, shift pickups or part-time work scaled up with additional shifts actually hinder our ability to make long-term sustained decisions within our operations.
Susie?
Thank you, Chair. And my last question is, and I think you may have touched on this, but maybe you might have a little bit more to add to it, and that was, I wondered if you had put out, I wouldn't want to say that we necessarily need a, what's the word I'm looking for when we do a study, but do you often put out surveys? I guess would be not a study, but a survey to the membership. I know the union would do that probably to their membership, but do you as Health PEI put out to say, are there things that we can be doing that would improve your feeling of your self-worth within the system?
So I definitely know our people in professional practice have everything from, pulse surveys and also, informal check-ins. And then I think through the program review, our ears are wide open to other things. And then there's sort of a more formal feedback loop depending on the cycle and sort of the intent. The one thing we really want to make sure is don't ask questions you don't want honest answers to. And I think a lot of the feedback we hear in our system is you did a survey, but then what? We didn't hear the results. And so I think we want to make sure that we navigate collecting, meaningful feedback that is valuable, and the people who can tell us what's on the front lines are those that are doing the work every day, but then also balancing our ability to respond in a meaningful way that we can sustain. And so I think, it varies by year and cycle depending on what we're doing and where we're focusing, but we are committed to getting feedback, that's for sure. And I think if there are other suggestions on how we can better do that, we're also open to having those conversations.
A comment.
Go ahead, Susie Dillon, for a comment.
Thank you, and that's refreshing to hear, because I do hear from our nurses that they want to be able to help within the system, and they want to, just want to make sure that they're feeling like they're supported and that somebody's actually listening to them. So thank you for that. Thank you, Chair.
Great. So we're going to go Peter, Tyler, and then Brendan will start the second round of questions. Peter Bevenbeck.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you all for being here. I'm going to follow right on from Susie's questions and comment regarding the nursing staff that we have on staff currently. The nurses have been without a contract now for 14 months and counting. And I realize that collective agreements sometimes take a while. I think it was over 2 years the last time the nurses came to an agreement with Health PEI. But we're at a very critical situation in our healthcare system at the moment where we need to not only recruit but retain all of the nurses that we possibly can. And without an agreement, our nurses are unsure of what lies ahead. They're already $5 an hour approximately behind New Brunswick, the RNs. And without an agreement, the ability for, and I'm delighted too that all the new nurses, or virtually all the new nurses from UPEI have committed to full-time positions here on the island. But in order to actually feel more secure that all of the nurses coming forward are going to do that, I really think we need to have that collective agreement finished. I know that you have met with the Nurses Union 20 plus times over the last year, and I would love to think that that is a really high priority, and it concerns me, perhaps saddens me, that we don't have an agreement at this time. Can you give us some sense of when you expect that process to conclude?
Okay. As we are in active negotiations, I won't comment on any specifics. Yes, they are ongoing. Yes, they have taken a substantial amount of time. The conversations at the table are really important to make sure that all parties have the opportunity to bring their concerns, priorities, and ideas for solutions forward. As an organization, finalizing this agreement is a priority. We feel it best benefits our system, those that work within it, and those that will join it in the future, and those that we want to stay within it. It's complex. It requires a partnership with obviously government and funding in addition to into our partners, but it is something that we talk about regularly. We're committed to moving forward as fast as we can with, again, what we can do within our scope, responsibility, and our abilities, but we are actively working to seek resolution and finish this as soon as possible. But like many things, they just take time. And that's longer than we want it to do, but it doesn't mean it's not a priority, and it doesn't mean that we're not hoping that we can't conclude this in the best interest of all parties as soon as possible.
Peter?
Yeah, and of course, Lorraine, I understand there's certain limits to what you can and cannot say. I do appreciate that, but I just wanted to make sure that this is, for lots of reasons, but a really high priority for Health PEI to conclude. For no other reason, I mean, there are lots of reasons, but perhaps the primary one is we know that we're spending tens of millions of dollars every year on agency nurses. Of course, a new contract is going to cost more money. I get that. There will be raises involved, as there should be. But I'm wondering, and I'm going to segue into one of the other recommendations, and it's 1127, which is the audits of physician billings. This has been ongoing for even longer than the nurses' contract being unsigned, since 2022, I think. So we're over 4 years now. And as I understand it, Health PEI has moved away from the original recommendation from the audit plan. The AG suggested that that be done on an annual basis. And we had various things in place. There were committees within Health PEI. We had a couple of positions specifically dedicated to auditing physicians. And I understand that we have either entered into, I see that we have entered, which suggests that it's a done deal. But I've also heard that we are negotiating for a contract, 14-month contract with Medivy. And I'm wondering why the decision was made to, or maybe the first question is, have we abandoned the internal audit positions and committees which carried out that function for so long in favor of an external third party doing this? And if so, why did we make that decision?
So I think there's two considerations in that. So number one is, yes, we have established an internal audit position in Health PEI. We're pleased to share that despite challenging recruitment for that position, because it is a very unique skill set, that we have successfully recruited someone to join our team, and they will support a lot of that work. It is a complex audit function that it would exceed the abilities of an NN1. And so they're really going to help us sort of do the work that we need to do internally, and we want to support them the best that we can within our zones. For physicians specifically, like the nuance and technical strength required to really support a skilled audit in those billings is a complex analysis requiring probably more resources than we would be able to sustain internally and independently. And so we have partnered with an external partner that does have experience in exactly this. We have, worked with the Medical Society of PEI to notify them about what the spirit and the intent of this audit is, transparency of billing and accountability for those fees that are paid out of the public purse, and that work has begun. And, I think the key thing is it will continue to evolve as it should, and that's really what good fiscal responsibility does. It's a responsive system. And so, yes, the work is underway internally and externally. We didn't choose external because we didn't think, or we thought that it was better. We thought that the considerations were different. So yes, we bolstered our own internal audit resources, but we also identified that what we really need for that specific audit is a little bit of help with a broader scope of expertise and a broader team than we would be able to host independently. And there's economies of scale in that, and there's also some efficiency in that as well. And that's why we partnered with an external partner for that piece. But that doesn't mean that we don't have our own responsibilities internally that we have implemented and hope to sustain.
Peter?
That's interesting. There was a lot in that answer, Lorraine. Every single one of these recommendations has as a heading internal control weaknesses. Some are new recommendations, some are recurring recommendations. And when I look at, I'm thinking of the radiology report that was also done recently, which exposed some internal control weaknesses. That was a bit of a red light to me, and I suspect for Health PEI as well. And I'll be asking some questions when we get to any other business at the end of the committee meeting specifically for the legal opinions which supported the comments that were made here by the Chief Medical Officer a little while ago. But getting back to internal auditing, the Auditor General had made a recommendation, I think it was 2 years ago, that government implement internal auditing across all departments. And we just recently passed a budget where 3 positions are being established, all within the Department of Finance. I'm wondering whether any cost-benefit analysis was done either in Health PEI or Finance when you hired Medivy, who does so much within our health system. Every turn, it seems like Medivy is adding a new aspect to the services that they provide here, which is a concern of mine anyway. But whether or not you had discussions with Finance PEI about establishing internal auditing within Health PEI, and also if any of those 3 positions are dedicated partially or fully to the work of the health department.
From a model standpoint, I can say that we felt that the scale of the audit required and the depth would exceed what we could sustain in sort of fiscal positions and skill set. And so we chose to outsource that specific amount of work. And just based on sort of the nuances, the experience, the track record of doing this exact same work in another jurisdiction. And so that's how that group was identified. And if we were to recruit to a specific position or person, I think there's also some challenges. We are a small island, and anytime we have auditors, we want to make sure that we're able to maintain a level of accountability and also distance where possible and necessary, and eliminating potential perceptions of conflict. And so we definitely, in a small space, those are often a little bit harder to do, especially within our health field. And so, lots of reasons, but ultimately to outsource someone who has a proven record of doing this exact same work, we're able to demonstrate a timeline in which we needed to achieve because of obviously the scalability and the hit the ground running, as opposed to build something from scratch, the infrastructure and the expertise and experience and analysis. And so that's why we chose it for this specific work. For internal work, I'll let Christine speak to what that looks like, because she'll be able to say how we're doing that for so much more than just physician audits.
Yeah, and so I think that really is that linkage too between the three positions that you mentioned that'll be in the Department of Finance and will lead the government's overall internal audit function. We still require a level of internal audit within Health PEI, but that role can really act as coordination and liaison. So if the internal audit function in government is looking into something, they need a contact in Health PEI. They need somebody who can help facilitate the work plan, who can review that and work together to complete the internal audit function. So we don't have as much line of sight, I would say, to the positions and the scope for the internal audit in the Department of Finance, and I think that's good. They will set their work plan. They'll decide what they're going to audit, and as that includes our work, we will participate, and we have now a filled position to help support their work. And then meanwhile, we can also undertake the pieces that we feel are important for our internal audit. And in some instances, because as Lorraine mentioned, it's one individual, we'll have to decide how to deploy that resource to address the highest items. And if I may, even in the pilot audit, one of the deliverables in there is advice on a long-term sustainable audit plan for Health PEI. So at the end of that pilot, that'll help us inform our plan going forward. And so to your point, absolutely on cost-benefit analysis, once we have informed what our plan looks like going forward, then we can make that cost-benefit analysis of how we would deliver that on a long-term basis.
Thank you, Peter.
You put me back on.
Sure. We'll move to Tyler DeRoche.
Thank you, Chair. I believe Peter pretty much, I had a few questions written out, and I believe he pretty much hit this one more or less where it was. But with it, this has been on the books from the Auditor General for 4 years, like 22, 23, 24, 20. This might even be the 5th year that he's put this through. It's been reoccurring. So will this 14-month contract with Medivie, will that solve the issue for the Auditor General? Will it stop this from being reoccurring every year? Is this going to fix what he wants fixed?
So I think it's twofold. One, it starts the work that needs to start and gives us a really good line in sight in how we're going to Christine's point, draft the work plan to really make sure that we're meeting the broad needs. So what we've given them a very defined specific subset of work. We have, worked with our physician partners at Med Society to help scope that and make sure that it's something that we could review, scale, and learn from. And then that work plan ultimately will be based on our experiences of doing this. We'll decide, do we need to adjust? I mean, good quality improvement isn't the assumption that when you start, you've got it perfect. Good quality improvement is that you start, you review, you monitor, you assess, and you adjust as required, and you keep going. And that's our commitment when we're thinking about audits for these physician services billings, but in addition to other organizational, audits as well.
Tyler?
Perfect. And I'll just bounce around a little bit and then back to the recommendation 11.16, significant balance of unused vacation time. One of the things that I heard a lot in my district from people that worked at PCH and whatnot, it wasn't the fact that it was the unused vacation time, it was the fact that they couldn't get it. There was no one to fill their positions. And that led to a lot of people not wanting to take a full-time position. They want to stay at the 50% so they're guaranteed to get their vacation time. Is there a way of getting that fixed? Is that starting to fall in line now?
So I think that's the multi-pronged approach and problem, in that we want more people to take and commit to larger FTE equivalents so that we can sustain more staffing sort of stability across the system and vacancies and also vacation coverage. And so then we can use sort of our casual staff to cover vacation as opposed to pick up core operating shifts, which is perfect case scenario and relies on a lot of things like upskilling the workforce that we have, recruiting, retaining the staff that we have, and at times using agency to cover those shifts, all while managing overcapacity and system sustainability. So I would say that the solution is complex. We think we're moving in the right direction. But it's going to take some time because it is a complicated scenario with many different considerations.
I think too, we're talking about trust, right? So for people to take that full-time position, they need to know that there is somebody who's going to backfill. And so we've seen some really strong successes, including at Prince County Hospital. With our emergency department, for example, we know that we are increasing based on our new grads, and once they get through and get their onboarding, do their courses, et cetera, that there'll be those critical masses that we need. It does take time, and you can solve for that, and then you may have another area that you need to adjust as well. But I think building that trust is really what's critical. And we do need some part-time positions. We'd like to have more full-time, those ratios increasing to full-time, but we do need some part-time to do a 24/7 facility.
Tyler?
And just to follow up on that without wasting a question, Chair. So all our grads that we're hiring, are we hiring all them at 100% FTEs? Or are we still taking some new hires in at a lower percent?
The ones that we've made offers to and that have accepted that wanted are full-time.
Good.
Yeah, they may be temporary but they're full-time and they're guaranteed permanent status with Health PEI.
Perfect.
Tyler DeRoche for his fourth and final question.
Clarification. And on one of your answers, Lorraine, to the agency staff, and it was reliance on agency staff in the future that you're going to have to rely on and whatnot. And we know what the system looks like now, where QEH almost got away with it without any until they had an overcapacity. But what will it look like if we stopped agency staff now for somewhere like PCH and somewhere KMH, the nursing homes? Like, would these places even be able to run without the agency staff now?
No, we would not be able to function in many of our locations without the use of agency staff. It is a reality that we face. It's a reality that many face. Do we hope that there's a compromise where we can mitigate it and reduce it where possible? Yes. But if we just stopped, no, unfortunately, we wouldn't be able to sustain our system.
Okay, Tyler's finished. Hilton?
Yeah, thanks for coming in. You had mentioned in the presentation about Prince County and Western, apparently one of the highest users of travel nurses. Have you identified a reason why? And do you have a strategy to maybe solve that situation? To work on it anyway.
Yeah. So I've been with Health PEI now since 2021, and those areas have been typically, at Prince County Hospital was one of our first hospitals to actually engage with agency staff because of some critical vacancies. There are small, big hospitals. So Prince County Hospital, I always say, is a small, big hospital. And so the numbers that you need to sustain the full service that they have there, so ICU as an example, emergency department, surgery, our ops gynae, all of that service is really critical for people in the West. And so the recruitment efforts have been significant. We have had a heavy reliance on agency staffing that has meant that we haven't had to close beds. So this is a critical difference too. Over the last number of years, we have not closed beds to allow for vacations, to allow for those summer slowdowns, et cetera. And in fact, we've opened beds to make sure that they're sustainable. So in the West, I'm pleased to say that there were a number of new graduates that did go to Prince County Hospital as well as Western Hospital. And we have been looking at senior staff who can also mentor the newer staff that are coming. In terms of all of the things with workforce development that have happened with our workforce advanced learning colleagues in terms of Marion L. Reed scholarships, the return and service arrangements, the kind of targeted classes of RCW, LPN with Holland College, et cetera. All of those have really increased the pipeline for the locally grown staff that we're working actively to catch all of them and make sure that they're placed.
Hilton?
Thanks, Chair. I'm going to jump into something else here. It talked about the asbestos management plan. So do you have a schedule going for, you've identified some buildings. Do you have a schedule going forward, like you're going to do so much one year, so much one? Have you actually have a plan in addressing these buildings?
We do have a plan, and I'm happy to say we have Jillian Nixon with us, who's our acting director for occupational health and safety. And if there's specific questions around the plan, I'm happy to invite her to speak.
She's knower of all things, but notably asbestos is one of her
Is that
superpowers. Are you able to? perhaps-
Just, would the committee approve of her speaking or answering a few questions? Okay, great, perfect. And does our guest need any water or anything, or?
I'm okay, thank you.
Okay. So we'll get you to introduce yourself for Hansard and your title, and then you can move on from there.
Great, I'm Jill Nixon. I'm Acting Director of Occupational Health and Safety for Health PEI. And to answer your question, we do have plans for all of our locations that have asbestos-containing material that was identified through the surveys conducted there. And they range greatly from lots of asbestos at buildings like KCMH to minimal amounts which have been abated from Western Hospital. So the plans are really dependent on where the asbestos is located, the hazard that it presents, and the condition that it's in. We are required under the Occupational Health and Safety Act and as per our plan to assess the asbestos annually, which we have been doing for one full cycle now in all locations.
Hilton?
Last one is, that's great, and I don't know whether you know or not, I've been following the old Wedgwood Manor there and the home care facility. Is that one of the facilities, and is there any plans on, fixing up or moving them out of there to get them away from
Wedgwood Manor.
the old the home
The home care
care
team,
office?
are you speaking specifically about home care?
Yes, the home care
In
office.
terms of
I
where
guess, in
they're
some-
moving, yeah.
Yeah.
So as the community health center opens in Summerside, there will be some domino effects. There isn't an active plan right now for home care, but that's on our assessment stage at the moment in terms of where they'll be moving to.
Okay.
And now, just while Jill's here, is there any other questions for her at the table at this time on asbestos, Peter?
asbestos?
I'm kind of going off of the list just because we made a change. So I'll maybe one each. Peter?
Opportunity, thanks. And my questions, I think, will be quick, Jill. Really, I'll ask them as one question. But the first is, how many Health PEI buildings have an asbestos issue? And secondly, is specifically about the KCMH. What's left to be done before a sort of final plan can be put in place there?
We have 4 buildings that currently have asbestos-containing material, so KCMH, QEH. I want to make sure I have it accurate for the record. Western and Hillsborough Hospital. And they all have plans specific, again, to the environment, the type of asbestos, the location of asbestos, and the, yep, KCMH. Did I miss that on the
Yeah,
list?
no,
Sorry,
you did. No,
KCMH.
you mentioned it.
So KCMH has had significant abatement work done over the last year. And as part of the plan, the asbestos is typed into category by the condition as well as the action plan to remove. Because as you can imagine, some of the hazards are encapsulated or are behind walls are less of a concern than something that's out in the open that could cause accidental or emergency exposure.
Okay. Thank you, Jill.
Thanks. Brendan, you're good? Did you want to follow up on that?
I might take it offline.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. Carolyn?
Thank you for that. And welcome to the
Thank you.
committee. So has the work that Health PEI is doing regarding asbestos abatement resulted in any need to close any portion of the hospital or long-term care? Like, is there that level of concern anywhere where that might have been some of the reason why beds were shut down for whatever reason? For that reason?
Not specifically in relation to the asbestos, there has been situations at KCMH in relation to renovation projects, or where there has been concern, we would, of course, close for investigation and remediation if needed. But as part of the overcapacity discussions, not specific to asbestos-related concerns.
There hasn't been, it hasn't been for a long time. If there's been, it may have been like the room closed off for a period of time, but it hasn't been significant to result in a closed bed.
Thank you.
Carolyn?
Thank you for that. So that's good to hear. So I may have missed this when Peter asked the number of buildings. Do you have a number of buildings? Is it just the 4?
Yeah, it's the 4 that I listed have asbestos-containing material in them currently. And then 2 were identified and remediated completely. So it was Harmony Lane and Surrey Hospital. So they were identified as having asbestos-containing material, however, it was removed and remediated. So there's no longer a plan required for those locations.
Okay. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Brendan?
Thank you, Chair. So my question regarding the asbestos in the facilities across the province is there a contingency plan for, how do I put this? Is there a contingency plan for staff who have had a prolonged, perhaps, exposure to some of those asbestos-containing, these facilities that have asbestos? So and I'll give you a little context. My mom spent 25 years at the KCMH and 47 years within Health PEI, and some people like in her situation where they may perhaps have had prolonged exposure to asbestos or asbestos-containing material. Is there a contingency plan for those staff that may be in that issue in that situation and may have health complications down the road?
Yeah, good question. I think it is important to note that the asbestos exposure concern is only when it's disturbed and friable, and that not all of the asbestos-containing material is hazardous in itself in the state that it's in currently. I would direct anyone who has concerns of exposure, obviously, to seek medical support, to have those discussions with their healthcare provider. There hasn't been any exposures in the last few years since I've overseen the asbestos management program.
Okay.
Brendan?
Perhaps I'll make a comment. Perhaps it's a suggestion that's something to look at, because some of these facilities, I understand KCMH, I can speak with the experience. Perhaps I understand that asbestos is only toxic if disturbed, and in some instances, some of these staff members have spent a number of years in those facilities, and perhaps it's something that I would urge Health PEI to look at, just to have some sort of contingency plan if at some point down the road a large group of staff all can come down with mesothelioma, and it's probably something that I would urge you to look at.
Yeah, and an important component of our plan is obviously hazard control. That's really the crux of the importance of the asbestos management plans. And there would be follow-up and support and directives if we did have exposure.
I just might ask one just on Hilton's question. Hilton was the question of the day, actually, today. That was an important one. Beech Grove Home, same thing as Wedgwood Manor. Beech Grove Home is an older home that was built around a certain time. Has there been, did you look at the long-term care facilities as well within that study? And is Beech Grove Home was cleared of any asbestos?
That's correct.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Great. So we're back to our lists. Round 2, we're going to go quicker questions, less preamble, and just a couple questions as we go. Thanks very much for your time there. Just to keep the meeting moving, I think you've done a great job. Really good questions, but let's consent 2 questions and maybe a follow-up question as we get going. So, wouldn't you know it, Brendan's going to lead us off again for round 2. Thank you.
I was going to say finally, but I did get up. Chair, thank you. So as I had mentioned, my mother spent 25 years, 47 years within diagnostic services, whether it was Queen's Health or King's Health or Health PEI. And so I understand when it comes, you grow up and your mom comes home and there's a recruitment package or a recruitment campaign for nurses or LPNs, and it's oftentimes the diagnostic service, the individuals within the diagnostic services department within Health PEI felt as though the recruitment hadn't necessarily brought them to the same jest as others, but it's really a key rung within the Health PEI ladder. If the diagnostic services within a hospital falter, and then the health system certainly does collapse around it. And I understand, my mom was one of 2 X-ray techs and lab techs that worked at KCMH. There was only 2 within the whole hospital, and they were working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week when I was a kid. So I do understand that recruitment is key, and you had mentioned, Corinne, that if one takes a prolonged leave, or it really creates a big hole. So I do have a couple of questions, and just how many vacant funded positions are within diagnostic services, whether it's X-ray, technologist lab services, or ultrasounds across PEI?
I would have to come back to you with the actual numbers, but I'm happy to do that. Yeah.
We appreciate that,
Yeah.
and perhaps, with the FTEs.
Yeah, I will say, I can give you an example with our MRI, which we had 2 funded positions this time last year. We now have 7. Oh, sorry, we had 4, 2 were vacant. We now have 7 funded positions, and we, as of the end of June, will be at 6 of 7. So that's like an example of a very small number of a specialized service that's critical to delivering on our mandate at Health PEI, and that's targeted recruitment. And that's still a small number, right, that we want to maintain, but it will put us in the right place to advance on our wait times for sure.
Perfect. I appreciate it.
But I can get the rest of it.
And then, one more with a short preamble.
No, I won't have any preamble on this one. Maybe a little. Maybe a little. So forgive my ignorance in this, and you might be able to answer quickly. I know when probably early 2000s, there was a shortage in laboratory services and people who take blood. I know collection, and within collection, and there was at that point in time there was a program within, and it was run out of the O'Leary Hospital, and at that point in time they cross-trained X-ray technologists to laboratory services. Is that still going? Do we still do that to try to? I understand we're filling the gap with the same amount of people, but is there still that service provided for some of those key areas?
I think it's really important that we note that there are some skills we can transfer across sort of work zones and some that are very nuanced in their training, and so cross-training isn't always possible. At Health PEI, we definitely work on sort of providing specialized training, so if they can be cross-trained within their own zone of responsibility or scope of practice and role, we're definitely committed to doing that. The other piece, I think, is that we've really worked with our partners, whether it be at Workforce and Advanced Learning, and partnerships for those that have to pursue education off-island for these unique skill sets that we aren't able to. And I have a health workforce background, and there's some that you can farm and there's some that you can hunt. And so, this is a situation where we really partner with off-island academic institutions to secure either academic seats for very specific skill sets and training programs, or we partner with Marion L. Reed, in sort of a return in service, and that we offset some of the tuition costs that may be incurred in pursuing a program that isn't available locally. And then those for our own team that are pursuing education to further their career within our own system, we also have those pathways so that they may be able to pursue additional training so that they can cross-train or retrain within our own system.
Thank you. We have Carolyn, Matt, Peter, and Susie on the list. So, Carolyn?
Hi, thank you, Chair. So short preamble, I'm going back to Treasury Board process here. So there would have been a point in time when the Health PEI would have been aware last fiscal that you were over budget and needed to go to Treasury Board to pay for the travel nurses, for example. At what point was that? And do you have a plan, or no, that's the wrong way to word it. What is your plan for monitoring that this year? And can you start with that, elaborate there?
So our forecasting really starts as soon as the budget is set. And so we'll use data from our first month of actuals, test it against what we expected to spend, and we'll do this on an ongoing basis. We do have formal required submissions on a quarterly basis that we put into Treasury Board, where we can notify what all of our spending is trending towards and manage it against our approved appropriation. And then we work with Treasury Board and Finance to determine when things like special warrants might come into place. So for us, that process is already underway. We have our budget. We are rolling the budget details out to all of the leaders in the organization, so they have line of sight to how much has been approved through the process, what initiatives have been funded in the budget, and then we are supporting them with some new reporting tools, so to pull from the system and give them a report and say at the end of month one, here's where you stand. And so then the team sort of pushes down and then collects back up. So based on the information we have about the positions that are vacant, when might that position be filled, and they use that to then forecast the remaining months of the year and compile it all up to a total. And then we'll report that in on a regular basis throughout the year.
Carolyn?
Thank you for that. How would you balance the requirement for nursing? At what point would you make a decision, or would you make this decision to say, we need to manage our fiscal responsibility, but we also obviously must provide healthcare to islanders? But is there a point in time where you would say, we don't have the nursing staff, and so we're back into a position of shutting down somewhere, closing beds, doing that, and the service becomes much more defined until you get through that financial hurdle? At what point do you look at it from that lens, or do you look at it from that lens? You don't have enough nurses, so you need to just stop.
So we did talk about program review that we're all undertaking within Health PEI, and I would say closing beds isn't really an option this year, for sure. And so that's a service that we have to be able to deliver on, and that we're committed to, where we see what the program review will result in and where we can achieve some economies of scale and some efficiencies. We're beginning that process now in a number of our areas. Lorraine, you may want to add.
Oh, we're in, this is a comment time, or this is?
It's a question.
Oh, okay, this is,
Thank you,
we're
Chair.
stretching.
Okay,
Quick.
scope of practice. And so clearly that would be part of what's happening within any program review. But considerations to what that could look like in the usage of LPNs versus RNs. And LPNs are trained to what the older RNs would have been in terms of bedside care. So how does that play into this?
The program review will make sure that we're using all resources, so financial, human, like I think about even infrastructure, to the best of their abilities. So it'll look at everything from, staffing, hours of operation, those working in the system, the duties within that, and then making sure that they're optimized within the individual scope of practice for it. So I think we're always looking at how we can do things to best utilize those working within the system where they are, or create opportunities for those to work at full scope. We definitely know that people want to work at full scope of practice. And the greatest part too is scope of practice has really evolved for many of our clinicians over the last couple of years, when we think about RN prescribing or physiotherapists and diagnostic imaging and x-rays. And so these are great things. And so when we, revamped the human resources sort of domain to really be people and professional practice, that work is really going to be part of every evaluation that we do, so that we can best use the teams that we have, and also so that the team members can see where those pathways are. So it could be LPN to RN bridging, it could be RN pursuing RN prescribing, it could be the physio, pursuing diagnostic imaging training. So there's lots of opportunities for our teams to see growth where they can optimize the scope. But yes, we want to make sure we're using the right people in the right place so that people can get the care they need where they need it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Put me back on, Chair.
Okay, great. Matt, for 2.5 questions now, we've changed the scope of questions.
I appreciate having 2.5 questions.
Well,
Thank you. One of the sections that are recommendations from the Auditor General that we really haven't touched on today is the lack of formal service agreements with other provincial health authorities, and that's always been of interest to me, so I might have a question or two on that. You indicate in your presentation that there is an interprovincial MOA that's being worked on. Can I ask what you might be at liberty to disclose about that? Because are we in a position to give anything to that arrangement, or is it more of a we'll pay and we'll take from what the other provinces might be able to offer? I know the Premier has mentioned before maybe standing up and promoting our sexual health and reproductive services clinic so that it could be a maritime hub. Is there anything that we're adding into that arrangement, or is it just you give us these services, New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, we'll pay for them?
I mean, it's a great question, and I think first of all, the agreements are at the government to government level. So just to put that into perspective, from a health service delivery, most of the services that we require are subspecialty services like cardiac surgery, kind of thing that we wouldn't have the economies of scale to produce here. But that's not to say that we wouldn't have some specialties that we can offer. That's a good example that you've explained there, although women's health is a priority across the Maritimes, et cetera. So I think we'll be seeing more and more of that. So I think what we do offer, though, from a Health PEI perspective is really strong primary care. So when we bring people back there, or when we have people that go, our goal is to make sure that they're optimized so that we can bring them back as soon as possible. So that repatriation. The other thing that we have in place, that's been in place for years actually, and our neighboring provinces didn't realize, is we have out-of-province liaison nurses situated in Nova Scotia and New Brunswick that are there to ensure that patients are known when they're in another hospital and that we're bringing them back. They are licensed in those provinces, but they report to Health PEI and are hired by Health PEI. And so that sort of connection is really important. And then our transport is another area that we're really ensuring that we're able to repatriate patients back as soon as possible. So limit the time that we're a burden on those provinces.
I just have one other thing to add, and I think it would be remiss to not mention how many visitors we welcome to PEI every year. And we do open our doors to provide care when needed, whether it be emergencies or other unexpected treatment. And so that would be a perfect example of where we do support those that come and care regularly. And so we may not be able to offer, to Corinne's example, a cardiac surgery division, but we do a lot of great things to support other Canadians that come visit. And I think that that's really, really important within the realities of our system. And so a lot of the things that we do partner with away, whether informally and hopefully in the soon future more formally, is really those that require a volume that we will never be able to sustain independently based on our population. And admittedly, ones that we may at this present time not even be able to create at a scale that we could offer to others because of nuances with respect to sort of the infrastructure and the academic components required. So anything is possible in the future, and I think we're definitely open to exploring that, especially as our medical school, continues to expand those services and our students. But right now, I think we're doing a great job with what we can, and we are really maintaining those partnerships with our adjacent provinces more regularly, but also for those that come to visit as well.
Great. Matt?
Sure. And I know I only have 1.5 questions left, so just maybe I'll use my half question on this one, Chair. Presumably there must be a strategy here based on PEI data for areas that we can't stand up, and it makes abundant sense to look at what we can utilize other health authorities' services. Do you foresee Islanders losing access to anything locally as part of these discussions that currently could be being offered, but we're going to be giving up, and then we're going to have to travel off island to?
So I can assure you that the conversations to date have been how we can better support and bolster what we have, whether they're through sort of satellite partnerships, but never considered to date to be in place of what we offer. So, for example, if we're thinking about plastic surgery, you know, we have a great cohort, but not necessarily one that we can sustain, call, you know, 365 days a year. So that would be an example of a partnership where we'd be supplementing existing with no intent to replace or downsize our local. So right now, it's always to provide a relationship for what we don't have currently, or to support what we have, whether it be on a short term due to a leave or an academic departure for training, or, you know, while we sustain recruitment, or for sort of a longer term strategy where we just know we won't be able to have the volume to sustain. So we do what we can, but to Corinne's point, trying to bring them home as well as soon as possible.
One example that I can give is we had a shortage of respirology here in PEI, and we, our partners in New Brunswick stepped in to help, but we've been able to recruit back to that, to a higher number. So we are now in the position of having a full complement of respirologists that we're able to offer on island. So when we do have those short-term departures and whatnot, our goal is always to recruit back where the population demands it. So respirology would be a really good, important one with our aging population.
Great. Matt? One more, thank you, Chair. I appreciate that. So I'm just going to shift to quickly on the discussion on internal physician billings audits, and that is the recommendation from the Auditor General specific to internal physician billings audits. Is it the intention of Health PEI that the auditor position that we've discussed would be limited to what the Auditor General has talked about? He mentions in 11.2.5 an example of emergency premiums applied to after hours regardless of whether they were emergency in nature. I guess my question is, what is the scope of audit that Health PEI would intend this position to do? And are we looking at patients on the panel? Are we looking at, you know, would this be an accountability process for physicians to be held accountable for certain metrics? I know we talked about the KPIs in the operational plan before. How broad is the scope intended to be of this auditor position?
I can talk about the scope of the contracted audit that we have that's really to address the physician billing audits and the standing up of that. There is a routine monitoring process. So that routine monitoring is a random selection of physicians and a random selection of billing codes. And it's testing whether the service provided, by looking at the record, did the service provided align with the billing code that was used? And that is really focused on an education component. So if there are issues that are identified in the billing, then it's really about education. From those selections, though, if we notice a high incidence of I'd say, non-compliant billing, could lead to what we would call discovery. So discovery audit is in the scope as well, and that would involve picking a larger sample, so say 30 patient records of that code, to say whether it was anomalous or whether it was a more systemic issue. And from that discovery audit, that really then tells us, should we move to something like a comprehensive audit? So comprehensive audit, we've also scoped out and would be done, and that is taking a statistically relevant sample over a fixed period. So say 100 codes over 2 years, and then that would say we could actually extrapolate that. And if there was an error rate found in that statistically relevant sample, we could extrapolate that to the entire billing cycle. And so the audit that we have for physician billings is all three of those components. It also includes, because I spoke to the randomness of that, it also includes 100% of the teleradiology billings, because the teleradiology in specific was also identified by the auditor, so 100% of those. And then the last scope of work we have is that I also spoke to the advice on a sustainable program moving forward. And so that's the physician billing audit plan that we have in place now.
Peter, and then Susie.
Two and a half?
2.5, yeah.
Okay.
Well, I'm watching your preambles, young man.
Okay, I mean, I've been accused of bringing forward half-baked bills, so half-baked question will be no problem at all for me. Following on from Matt's questions around the Maritime Interprovincial Healthcare Services Agreement, one of the barriers to that operating well is the incompatibility of our electronic medical record systems. Is that going to be part of the agreement? And if so, what obligations do you foresee Prince Edward Island having to come up with?
So I could assure you that flow of information between partners is always on the table because it enables patient care, also, supports good, safe, best practices. And then we also realize that unintentionally can be a bit of a barrier if it's clunkier to review a chart from one jurisdiction than the other. PEI is in a really unique spot where we're actually ahead of most places in Canada with respect to the infrastructure we have in electronic health records, from primary care, community-based specialists, community programs, and our acute care. And so one of the things that we realize when we partner with other provinces is we are partnering with physicians or health systems that may not have an electronic health record or the same one. And so I think it is not an apples to apples playing field, and it's not a decision that we can make independently with respect to integrating our system into theirs if they are in different journeys with respect to implementation of electronic health records. So one of the things that we have definitely considered, and there's an Atlantic Leaders Forum, this is a conversation that we have nationally as well, but from within our health authority is, let us know how we can use what we have to support the processes currently, while still mutually striving for something better, but appreciating that that's not always a decision we get to make independently. Like, we will never have an oversight of the electronic health record system that Vitalite will choose. And Vitalite may choose one that will never integrate to ours based on language requirements or beyond. And so that's the great part about them making the best decision for their health authority. But what we have a responsibility is to make sure the information that we share about our patients before and how we receive is packaged in a way that works for the system. For those out-of-province providers that work regularly with us, we work with them and their IT service providers and their health authority, firewall IT support teams to make sure that we can give them direct access where possible. So we are definitely endeavoring to find efficiencies in good access to electronic health records within the realm of today, while aspiring for long-term plans. And I think we think about the patient summary that is a national standard and admittedly an international standard. And New Brunswick has theirs available, Nova Scotia has theirs. Their inputs are different. We have My Health PEI, which is a key thing as well. And so more and more information is going to be at the hand of the citizen to share information. But admittedly, it may not always be the information that that clinician receiving it wants. Like, I don't know if always, the cardiologist in St. John wants to know how much sleep I had that my Fitbit has uploaded into My Health PEI. So we have to be really cognizant of the information that we're sharing. But the great part is we have good partnerships with these regional health authorities. And so we do have active conversations about what's working. Can we look at something that could support best possible flow today and in the future?
I'll squeeze my last 1.5 into one question, Chair. You mentioned the teleradiology, Christine, in your last statement. And one of the concerns that emerged from that audit was our vulnerability in terms of setting a standard, it not being met by the agency that we had paid to provide it. But there was a vulnerability because it was a one-way, it was a non-competitive market. We were at their mercy, if I can put it that way. I'm concerned that with all other agreements that we may come up with our provincial counterparts here in the Maritimes, that we will be in a similarly vulnerable position for fees that they may charge our health authority here. So it's a two-part question, 1.5-part question. The first is, in the absence of an agreement, which, as Corinne said, we've had sort of a handshake agreement, I think was the terminology used. How are those fees determined? And secondly, as we go forward, how do we avoid a situation like we had with teleradiology, where we are the only buyer in a non-competitive market? How do we make sure that we're getting best value for money?
So the great part about having the conversation together is when we're looking at interprovincial services, the health authorities and the governments for all three provinces, and it's not that Newfoundland wasn't willing to come to the table, but the likelihood of utilizing the agreement was very, very low. So it is specifically a maritime versus an Atlantic agreement. But I want to just highlight, everyone's coming to the table to have the same conversation, because the goal is to have consistency, whether it be an agreement between, Health PEI and Horizon and IWK, and across the board. So we want to make sure that there's consistency in approach, and by having the conversations about everything at the same time all together, it prevents those potential vulnerabilities where possible. To date, and I can only speak for the ones that we have on an interim basis while we finalize it, they are very consistent in their approach with respect to physician fees relative to the organization or the province in which the physician practices. So those fee codes are based on where the physician resides, and they would be beholden to their physician services agreement no differently than if we were supporting that service as well. The system costs are very specific and based on sort of national standards of approach to acute care costs. That is a national forum where the recommendations are made based on sort of bed rates. And if it is determined that because of the nuance or acuity of a patient, the system is incurring an atypically large cost relative to sort of the service, we call it the delta. We worked with the health authority to sort of determine a consistent approach on that delta and what that is. And then ultimately we realized that's pretty hard, and so we're trying to find a way to sustain it. So if your bed rate for a ward is $580 a day, please don't quote me because it depends on health authority.
It's a lot more than that.
Yeah. But if you're caring for, a specific procedure patient afterwards, there's more dressing changes, there's more nursing hours. That's the delta that we're trying to normalize. And so the great part is we're having these conversations together. And then the last piece comes into if there are expectations regarding expansion of infrastructure or capital investments within a region that's not ours to support our patients, there's a willingness to recognize that we have to support it where possible, but that doesn't mean independently. And so I think, if they have to expand relative to their own population growth as well, but they are supporting a population portion of ours, then, we do have a responsibility to support those costs. Because if we had them locally, those would be our cost to bear as well. And we just need to find that partnership to make sure that we are getting good value while sustaining services. So that's a really long way of saying the great part is that we're all in it together, and the approaches we're taking with every province are the same. And they're having the same approach with each other. And so we're trying to make sure that we have consistency and equity where possible.
Just to add, I think currently now how we pay for services out of provinces through the reciprocal billing. So Lorraine said that every year provinces get together and they define what those rates are, and they agree on what those rates are. So the cost of a bed in a hospital, the cost of an ICU bed is different in St. John than it is in Halifax than it is in PEI. So if we have patients that are in St. John, for example, we pay their daily rate. So that's one of the reasons why we want to repatriate people faster, so that we're minimizing the costs that we're incurring. And then we also have a very good idea of our population that is being served. And so where cardiac care, for the most part, is happening in Horizon Health, it's about 10% of their overall volume is for PEI. So we can sort of model based on the population that's being served. We know in Atlantic Canada, and especially in the Maritimes, for example, the IWK is our regional children's hospital and women's health hospital. And so the numbers and the volumes that go, we're modeling that with Nova Scotia and New Brunswick as well. That's been part of the work that we've been working on for the last 2 years.
Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Peter. Susie, and then Carolyn, and then I might have two little ones.
And I'm not sure whether my question's going to fall under, so if it doesn't and you don't know the answer, that's okay. But I wanted to talk about the comment that was made about the hunting versus farming. And I believe that this is a hunting situation where we're looking for sonographers and ultrasound wait times. I wondered if you had any information around. And I'm going to put it's for everyone, but I am going to put a specific lens on women's health in terms of women who wait long periods of time to get that ultrasound to find out what's causing so much pain.
So I think there's two things. So yes, we do have really a focused allied health recruitment plan and strategy, or just an area of focus. And we're actually really working with our recruitment team right now to see how we can better improve not only identification of key positions, but making sure that we're really supporting targeted recruitment where necessary. Sonography is definitely one on the list, and one that we've really flagged. The other piece too that we're looking at is it's not only sonographers, and yes, we do have some vacancies in sonography, but it's also inconsistencies of availability of specific types of sonography tools and equipment. And just last week, we had a long conversation about, what could we do to increase our point of care ultrasounds or investment of specific ones to allow those specific scans at the appropriate times to reduce travel off island for these key tests during pregnancy and beyond. And so I think the key part to say is these conversations are ongoing. We're looking to implement where possible at many of our locations across PEI to support better access and access closer to home, whilst also recruiting and encouraging people to consider the workforce. I think, we had a great meeting last week with the Department of Health and the Department of Workforce and Advanced Learning, and the conversation is like, how do you tell a grade 10 student about healthcare careers that aren't sort of the traditional 8 or 9? Like, how do you get them excited about medical radiation technology, and how do they know where to go? And we've chatted about, increasing awareness. We've talked about sort of ideas for mentorship programs, or, they have career counselors within the school system. Can we partner with them and tell them? And I giggle because, in a past life, I went to high schools all the time and told people that a pharmacist could do things other than be a community pharmacist. And at the time, I was in long-term care, and now I'm here. So I think there's some really good opportunities to increase awareness and increase curiosity. And then I think there's also an opportunity for us to really make sure that the scope that we offer in this province really sustains recruitment, because people want to work to full scope. And that's what we learned with our physiotherapists and x-rays, and that's what we learn across the board. So it's a really complicated approach, but I think it's the right one. It's just going to take some time.
Yeah, and I think I'd have to tag on there with our pharmacists. They've been upscaled to meet the scope of practice that they can practice with it as well. Happy to hear that the imaging isn't just for health issues, but for fertility. Excited to hear that. And I guess my last comment, Chair, if I could, is that I do believe that it is encouraging when I look across the table and I see 6 women sitting here with Health PEI, that women's health will get some attention. So thank you very much for your presentation.
Carolyn, speak into the microphone is what we've heard from we got
you?
messages. Yeah, just speak.
Okay, sorry about
Thank
that,
you.
folks. So thank you so very much for everything that you've shared with us today. But what I'm wondering, though, is there's clearly lots of questions still. Are you able to provide us with a list of the recommendations that the AG has provided you, which you have done, but with timelines? So here's the status of the recommendation, but here's our timeline to completion. Just to give us an idea, like you've talked a lot about we're at different stages of that, but what does that really look like? So if that's possible. And the other thing that I wonder about, you talked about providing Treasury Board with quarterly updates, I think it was. I'm assuming that your board would also receive updates, financial updates. Is there something that you can provide this committee on a quarterly basis in terms of financial status? We're on track, we're not on track, whatever that looks like. That would be really helpful for us, I think, as we go forward, because we'll be asking for it anyway. So it'd be helpful to just get you going with that.
So, yeah, I think we'll take that back and confirm what we can do. I think there's a commitment to ensure everybody has the information they need within, again, our realm of possibilities.
Absolutely.
So we'll take that back.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you, Chair.
All right, thanks. Just two quick questions for me. This is really helpful today. Travel nursing has been an issue for a long period of time, and we watched the kind of evolution of it. And but it's not just travel nursing. It's the other. I'm worried about the other specialties, especially in rural parts of PEI. That's why you look at Colville Manor. You look at different areas. But one of the things, well, the Minister of Everything at the time, Ernie Hudson, put in a float pool nursing. At the time, that was a few years ago. Then I think the evolution might have been to flex hiring last 2 years ago. Then it was delayed or paused or whatever the term was. I was wondering, like, why didn't we put more into that program? Wouldn't it have seemed the natural step to diminish our travel nursing, and was it the program itself, or was it too expensive, or why is there a pause on the flex hiring? This is coming from the unions, the nursing union and the various other ones, so I'll just...
So I think it's important to note that the float pool and flex hiring are two very independent, separate programs, interventions, and attempts sort of to support and address very different problems. So the float pool was implemented to say if we can incent team members to choose a different type of position within Health PEI that may be akin to travel nurses, so maybe, you know, recruit those islanders that may actually be working as travel nurses in other jurisdictions, or perhaps to recruit those that are traveling in. We created, I believe, 10 positions at the time, and we were able to successfully recruit one, and I think they actually ended up choosing a permanent position where they were floating to regularly. So it just, you know, it was a great attempt. We tried, we measured, back to quality improvement comments earlier, it just didn't have the impact that we wanted, and so we agreed to consider to try other things, and that's when we worked with our union partners on different MOUs, again, to say, is this hitting the mark? Is this how it is? So that was one thing. Flex hiring, although not the topic in this conversation, I have to say that, you know, we initially contemplated flex hiring to support recruitment into our system and positions of where we needed them, so to find positions for new grads, but also to support recruitment to positions that would be appealing to those relocating. And I often go back to the example, because I think it's important to note, the PCH at the time where they were experiencing closures in ICU, and there's a shortage of respiratory technologists, and we were trying to solve the RT problem, and we created new positions, and then we went to we got the allied health recruitment incentive, and then we posted 2.5s because that's what we had. But the reality is the likelihood of recruiting to PEI for 0.5, like this is that example, we don't grow our own, we have to recruit. It was off cycle, it wasn't a new graduating class, I think it was December or January. And so that, you know, the intent of flex hiring was how do you create that, take that 0.5 and make it a 0.8 or a 1 to optimize recruitment to specific positions, because you know you can't always roll 2.5s to make a 1.0 because of the way our 24/7 shifts go. So I think that was sort of the goal, is to create the flexibility within our existing positions to support recruitment and also matching people into the system. As it evolved, it sort of changed a little bit, and I think back to sort of program review, we need to make sure that the evolution is still in line with our organizational goals, that it's still sustainable. And so we have sort of paused any new flex hire positions to make sure that they meet the goals of our organization, that we can sustain them, and that they still meet our needs sort of for today and into the future. And they'll be considered as we do our program review, among other things.
Yeah. And I appreciate that. It's a little bit more technical. Like, as the critic of health, look at this stuff, and and then talking with others that said that I'm worried about recruiting into different, harder to get positions. So, and the last thing I want to say is thanks for your strategic plan and your business plan, and I look at those very, very closely, and I would like some more measurables in there, in the business plan and the strategic plan. But I appreciate the time. One of the things, and I still haven't figured it out, comes out in October, half the year's done. How do we get around that? And because it's, especially now, there's been a lot of changes with Health PEI. It seems like you've got good reins on things, but I want to know, and I want to keep you accountable, and I do that through not necessarily the strategic plan, but more the business plan. So when is that going to be coming out this year, I guess, would be the hard question, and we're already well into the year at this point.
So I think the key, you know, we just really finalized our budget.
Yeah.
It's hot off the press. So I think, you know, that's a valuable component of it. Yeah. It's Tuesday. So just give us a minute. But I think the key thing is we didn't just wait for that. I mean, that work is underway.
Yeah.
The indicators in which we report are clearly spelled out in our strategic plan. And so, you know, those metrics are monitored along the way. And they're the ones that the board is holding us as leaders accountable to the organization. And it's also the ones that we report to. We would like to share that information as soon as possible. It includes data collection, validation, alignment, and beyond. And so there's a lot of reviews to do this. And our hope is to make them available as soon as possible, but just based on timings that are often beyond our control as well. April 1st is just not something that we can achieve at this time.
Yeah, exactly. I know a lot of it comes through with finances, but I always look to more about where are we going business-wise, and I guess you can't do that without the financials. So, but I think this meeting was. Does the committee feel okay with questions? Anything else? Perfect. I want to thank. I know your time is very valuable, and I want to thank you all for coming today, and especially Jill. Yes, Jill, for coming in and doing a great job here, and everybody else. So, at this time, we will. I just don't know. Let's just take a second. Is there any new business?
Before we close, I referred to RTs as respiratory technologists, and I want to correct the respiratory therapists. My apologies. I value the RTs, and I don't want to think that I didn't get it right. So that tagged me, and I just want to correct the answer if possible.
Exactly. Actually, perfect. So at this time, maybe we'll take a quick pause because should we review the schedule because there is a few things. So just about a minute. No conversations at this point. We'll come right back into it and just leave our guests a chance to leave. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Bye. Okay, we'll bring it back to review of scheduling is next on the list, and I appreciate it because we had a pause because the Legislative Assembly was there, and we have a certain amount of time to come through to get to the end of June, so we're pretty full up until that point. What I'll do is I'll pass it over to Ryan to just go through the schedule, and then we can go into new business.
Sure, thanks, Chair. So yes, the committee does have meetings essentially lined up or already announced for every Tuesday in June. Next week, you'll have Health PEI back again, different representatives on 2 other AG reports relevant to Health PEI. The week after that, Department of Finance and Affordability will be here to talk about the AG's annual report. And then in an afternoon meeting that same day, social development and seniors on social programs overpayments, which is in the annual report. It hasn't been announced yet, but we're likely to have the Institute of Internal Auditors here on June 23rd. Just confirming that, and I'm told the AG is going to be releasing 1 or maybe 2 reports this month, so he is available to come in on June 30th, the last Tuesday in June as well.
Okay, great. So we do have a busy time with that. Anything the committee wants to talk about with that, with the schedule? Okay, so that Tuesday, we have 2 meetings on that Tuesday, and it might even be more if the Auditor General does release some audits as we get going, so, yeah, perfect.
You have to come to the table, please.
Well, maybe we'll go to Peter. Did you have something?
No, just when we get to new business. I do.
Okay,
No.
perfect. Carolyn?
Thank you, sorry about that, Ryan. I'm wondering, the 2 new reports, do we know what they're on?
I believe one is a follow-up to the Health PEI Executive Leadership Team compensation report, and the other is on capital projects management.
Okay, thank you.
Great, perfect. All right, and then so we'll move on to new business, if the committee has any new business at this time. We have, we'll go with Susie and then Peter.
Yeah, I just wondered if maybe in the fall, we might be able to get an update. The AG did a report on healthy foods in schools, and he had some recommendations there, and I believe that they have a new policy that's come out to be reviewed, and I'm just curious where they're at with that.
Okay. Would you like to bring the guests in? I know there was a English component and a French component to that.
I'll leave that up to the committee.
Okay.
I'm happy with the written report. I'm just curious to know where we are with the nutrition policy.
Perfect. If we look at that, maybe you would like a update before September when school starts, if it's if it's done, or I'm just saying, do we have to? Are we trying to bring the guests in for September, or can we send that letter out now to the parties for an update?
I will leave that to anybody that has a stronger. I'm okay in September to have that. I'm just curious to know where we are, whether
Sure.
it's been released and what we're doing with it.
Okay. Good. Any feedback from the committee at all?
I
Peter?
think Susie mentioned she'd be okay with a written report, so maybe we could request that initially before perhaps going to the stage of calling them in.
Sure. Okay, perfect. Would the committee be okay with that? So Ryan can draft a letter?
To both school authorities?
I think so, yes. I do believe would. Susie?
I thought there was somebody actually hired within the department to take that on, but I'm not sure who it is, actually. You know what? Send it to them, and they can send it to who they see fit, if that's okay, Chair.
CC. Would you like it CC'd to the Department of Education? They were part of that too. as
Or
well.
just in the letter to just say they can provide a designate. If it's not the two, like if it's somebody that's working on behalf of both school boards to be able to put this policy in place, which I believe it is somebody from the
Okay.
Department of Education, then the school boards can deflect to them.
Okay,
Okay.
perfect. You're okay with that?
Yep.
All right, excellent. Thank you very much, Susie. Peter?
So I mentioned this in our discussion today, and I think it was brought up sort of informally when the AG was here, and this is on the teleradiology issue, Chair. The argument of Health PEI, or the Chief Medical Officer, was that a legal opinion had been sought on whether or not the full cost of the billing was an appropriate thing, and based on that legal opinion, there were actually two. There was one in 2021 and then a later one in 2025. A full payment for services was rendered even though they did not meet the terms of the agreement. And there's some ambiguity about exactly what was in those legal opinions. They seem to be aligned. But the Auditor General, who has seen those legal opinions, said that it struck him that the legal opinions were in line with his opinion, not that of the department. So I'm just confused about the whole thing, Chair.
Yeah.
And I think the only way that we can get clarity on this is to see those two legal opinions. And also, I would request what the cost was for gaining those legal opinions. And so I would like the committee to write a letter to the department or Health PEI, I'm not sure, maybe Ryan can give us some direction on that. I think it was the department who sought the legal opinion, but I stand to be corrected on that, and that those opinions be provided to the committee.
Okay, and that's and if for the committee there was an audit done, and it was about efficiency of times when billing out, and if they were rendered emergencies or not, and if they were done within a certain period of time. I do believe so. But request is on the floor right now. Would the committee be okay to send a letter? I think it's maybe we'd have to do both. I think the department, if they had the legal opinion, and Health PEI, which as well, just to help Ryan formulate that letter. Would you be okay formulating that letter, or would you need any more information from?
No, I think I'm clear. You're looking for the two legal opinions referenced in relation to the teleradiology agreement, which was discussed here this past winter, and make this request to both Health PEI and the Department of Health and Wellness.
Mm-hmm. Great.
Thank you, Ryan.
Perfect.
Thanks, Chair.
Excellent. So anything else from the committee?
Do we need to approve that?
Oh,
Yes, Chair.
Sure. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Okay. Excellent. Next week, we'll see everybody back on Tuesday, I think, for a meeting. I'll be at one of the, I have to do an event at a leadership conference at Stone Park for kids. So Tyler DeRoche will be chairing that meeting, everybody. I know it's
It'll run smooth.
exciting. Yeah, very capable chair. Anyway, thanks a lot. I think that meeting was great today. Really good questions. Okay, and can I get a motion to adjourn? Great, Matt. And I think I forgot the motion to engage. So, did you? Okay, perfect. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you, members.